They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I, Eleanor Vance, never considered myself a vengeful woman. Not until the day I flew to California without warning and found my daughter, Sarah, dying alone in the intensive care unit, while my son-in-law, Mark Sterling, was celebrating on his yacht. In that moment, something broke inside me, something ancient and fierce. And then I froze every damn account he had access to. An hour later, he lost his mind. As for me, I was just getting started. The morning sun, usually a comforting presence, felt like a spotlight on my carefully constructed solitude. 68 years old, and my days unfolded with the predictable rhythm of a well-worn waltz. Bloomington, Illinois, was a town that valued that kind of rhythm. My small, tidy house, with its vibrant hydrangeas spilling over the porch railing, was my sanctuary. Every morning, the scent of fresh brewed coffee mingled with the earthy aroma of damp soil from my garden. I'd sit by the window, a book open but often forgotten, listening to the chirping of cardinals and the distant rumble of the school bus. It was peaceful, yes. But sometimes, in the quietest moments, a loneliness crept in, a thin, cold tendril that wrapped around my heart. It had been years since Robert, my dear husband, passed. He was the anchor, the laughter, the steady hand that always knew how to mend things. And then there was Sarah. My only daughter, a vibrant splash of color in a world of muted tones. She'd left Bloomington years ago, chasing the California sun and the promise of a life bigger than what our little town could offer. And she found it, or so I believed. She met Mark Sterling, a man who, from our brief video calls, exuded charm and success. He was everything a mother could wish for her daughter, or so I told myself. Rich, handsome, ambitious. He swept her off her feet, into a world of yachts, exclusive parties, and a sprawling beachfront home in San Diego that dwarfed my modest haven. We talked less and less as the years went by. Sarah was busy always. Mark was busy. Their life, a whirlwind of important events and social engagements. I understood. I really did. A mother's heart, though, always holds a sliver of worry, a silent prayer whispered into the void. Lately, that sliver had grown. It had been weeks since I'd heard her voice, longer since a proper email. Just a hurried text now and then, busy mom, talk soon. It wasn't like her, not really. Sarah, for all her grand ambitions, had always been a dutiful daughter. My internal monologue, a constant companion, nagged at me. Is she truly happy? Is she well? I pushed the thoughts down, like weeds in my garden, telling myself she was just living her best life, far away, as I had always wanted her to. The insistent, jarring ring of the landline cut through the morning's peace like a shattered pane of glass. It wasn't my usual morning call from Brenda, my neighbor and confidant. The number on the caller ID was unfamiliar, with a San Diego area code. My hand trembled as I picked it up. Mrs. Vance? This is Riverside Hospital. My name is Susan Miller, I'm a nurse. We have your daughter, Sarah Sterling, here. Her voice was calm, professional, but beneath it, I detected an unmistakable current of urgency. Her condition is critical. We need you to come immediately. The world tilted. Critical? Sarah? My Sarah? My mind reeled. What happened? Where's Mark? Has he been notified? My voice was thin, reedy, barely my own. Mr. Sterling was informed several days ago, ma'am. We've been unable to reach him recently. Your daughter, she's been admitted with severe cardiac complications, exacerbated by pneumonia. We've done everything we can, but her prognosis is very poor. We strongly advise you to come as soon as possible. A cold dread seeped into my bones, chilling me far more deeply than any Illinois winter. Mark had been informed several days ago, and he wasn't there? A knot of fury began to tighten in my stomach, competing with the terror. I tried calling his number over and over, my thumb clumsy on the buttons. Straight to voicemail. You've reached Mark Sterling. I'm busy changing the world, or at least my corner of it. Leave a message. The slick, confident tone of his recorded voice grated on my ears, a grotesque mockery of his usual charm. There was no debate, no hesitation. My age, my modest savings, the sheer distance, none of it mattered. Sarah, my precious girl, was in trouble. And she was alone. The thought was a dagger to my heart. "I'm coming," I whispered into the phone, though the nurse had already hung up. My hands moved with a strange, frantic efficiency. A small overnight bag, the few dollars I had saved for a new garden bench, my reading glasses. My quiet, orderly world had imploded, replaced by a singular, fierce purpose. I was flying to California. And nothing would stop me. The journey was a blur of fluorescent lights, stale recycled air, and the gnawing anxiety that twisted my stomach into tighter knots with every passing mile. Bloomington, with its familiar fields and predictable horizons, receded into the past, replaced by the dizzying sprawl of an unfamiliar landscape. I looked out the airplane window, watching the patchwork quilt of agricultural land give way to arid brown mountains, then to the glittering, endless expanse of the Pacific. California. It looked nothing like the sun-drenched, carefree paradise Sarah had described in her early letters. From this height, it appeared vast, indifferent, and utterly alien. A sense of profound helplessness settled over me, heavy and suffocating. I was a small, aging woman, venturing into a world that felt too big, too fast, and too uncaring for my weary soul. When the plane finally touched down in San Diego, the warmth of the air was a shock, a stark contrast to the chill in my heart. The airport was a chaotic symphony of hurried footsteps, loudspeaker announcements, and the incessant ring of cell phones. I felt utterly adrift, a tiny boat in a churning sea. A kind taxi driver, sensing my distress, helped me with my bag and navigated the maze of freeways. The palm trees, the stucco houses, the distant glimmer of the ocean, it all felt like a scene from a movie, not the grim reality I was about to face. Riverside Hospital was a towering, modern structure of glass and steel. It hummed with a quiet, efficient energy that felt cold and impersonal. My stomach lurched as I walked through the automated doors, the scent of antiseptic assaulting my senses. At the information desk, I gave Sarah's name, my voice cracking slightly. The young woman behind the counter, too young, too composed, pointed me towards a bank of elevators. Intensive care unit, 4th floor. The elevator ride felt interminable, each upward lurch a step closer to an unimaginable truth. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. When the doors finally slid open, I was met with hushed tones, the soft beeps of machines, and a palpable sense of solemnity. I found the nurse's station, my eyes darting nervously around the sterile environment. "I'm Eleanor Vance," I said to the nurse, a woman with kind, weary eyes. "I'm here to see Sarah Sterling." She nodded, a sympathetic flicker in her gaze. "Right this way, Mrs. Vance." She led me down a long corridor, past doors that were either closed or slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of tubes, wires, and pale, still forms. My breath hitched in my throat as she stopped at a door, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. There she was. My Sarah. She lay utterly still, a tangle of wires and tubes that seemed to consume her small frame. Her skin was a translucent white, her lips tinged blue. A ventilator tube disappeared into her mouth, its rhythmic whoosh the only sound in the room, apart from the steady, unnerving beeps of the cardiac monitor. Her dark hair, usually so full of life, was splayed across the white pillow, dull and lifeless. Her hands, once so expressive, lay limp at her sides, tiny needles taped to the veins. A sob caught in my throat, hot and agonizing. I felt my knees buckle, but I forced myself to take a step, then another, until I was standing beside her bed. My hand, trembling, reached out to touch her forehead. It was cool, almost clammy. My beautiful girl. So full of life, so vibrant, now reduced to this fragile, suffering form. My mind screamed questions, 1,000 desperate inquiries echoing in the silent room. How? Why? Why did it come to this? The nurse gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Dr. Sharma will be with you shortly, Mrs. Vance." She left, closing the door softly behind her, leaving me alone with my dying daughter and the relentless beeping of machines. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I sat in the chair beside Sarah's bed, holding her limp hand, stroking her hair, whispering prayers and endearments she couldn't hear. The tears flowed freely now, hot rivers carving paths down my cheeks. My heart ached with a physical pain I hadn't felt since Robert's passing. Finally, the door opened again. A woman with dark, intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor entered. She wore a white lab coat. "Mrs. Vance? I'm Dr. Anya Sharma. I'm Sarah's attending physician." Her voice was gentle, her eyes filled with professional compassion. She pulled up a chair opposite me. "I'm so sorry you had to see her like this. It's been a difficult few days." "What happened?" I managed to choke out, my voice raw. The nurse said, "Heart complications? Pneumonia?" Dr. Sharma nodded slowly. "Yes. Sarah has a history of a congenital heart condition, which we believe was exacerbated by a severe, untreated pneumonia. She was brought in by ambulance alone. She was already in cardiogenic shock. We've been fighting to stabilize her, but her heart is very weak. The infection has spread." She paused, her gaze meeting mine directly. "Mrs. Vance, I need to be frank. We've done everything we can. Her body simply isn't responding. We don't have much hope." The words hung in the air, heavy and devastating. No hope? My world, already shattered, splintered further. "And Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Her husband? Where is he?" Dr. Sharma's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Sterling was notified immediately upon her admission, and again yesterday evening. We've called his cell phone numerous times. His assistant informed us he was away on business. He assured us he would come as soon as possible. He hasn't arrived. Away on business." The words were a fresh stab of pain. My daughter was lying here, fighting for her life, on the precipice of death, and her husband was away on business. A cold, hard pebble of fury began to form deep within my chest, replacing the raw anguish with a different, more dangerous emotion. My Sarah, my vibrant, loving girl, was alone. Utterly, terribly alone, in a cold, sterile room, with only the machines for company. And her mother, who had come too late. The rhythmic whir and beep of Sarah's life support machines filled the room, a cruel, mocking soundtrack to my despair. I sat there, a silent sentinel, watching my daughter's shallow breaths, the faint pulse fluttering beneath her translucent skin. My mind, usually so clear and orderly, was a storm of grief, fear, and a burgeoning, icy rage. Mark. His absence was a gaping wound, a betrayal that festered with every passing minute. "Away on business," Dr. Sharma had said. It rang hollow, a transparent lie. My gaze drifted around the sterile room, searching for something, anything, to ground me. My eyes fell upon a small, wall-mounted television, typically tuned to a bland news channel. The volume was low, almost inaudible, but a flash of color caught my attention. A news segment, local perhaps, cycling through a montage of California's social scene. Wealthy smiling faces, glittering parties, expansive yachts cutting through sparkling azure waters. My breath hitched. The camera zoomed in. There, on the deck of a sleek, white yacht, champagne flute in hand, a wide, confident smile plastered across his face, was Mark Sterling, my son-in-law. Surrounded by a gaggle of laughing young women, all tanned and glamorous, their scant clothing barely concealing their carefree exuberance. He was toasting, his head thrown back in boisterous laughter. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, in bright yellow letters, "Sterling Yachts host annual charity gala. A splashy success." My blood ran cold. The image burned into my retina, searing away any remaining doubt or hope. My daughter, dying alone. His wife. And he, her supposed loving husband, was celebrating. A charity gala, no less. The hypocrisy was a physical blow, worse than any punch. A guttural sound escaped my throat, a choked sob that was quickly swallowed by the sterile silence of the room. This wasn't just neglect. This was an insult. A desecration. The man I had once believed to be a godsend for my daughter was nothing more than a shallow, narcissistic predator. He had built a gilded cage around my Sarah, lulling her into a false sense of security, draining her life and spirit, and now, as she lay dying, He was reveling in his freedom. Something within me, something dormant and ancient, snapped. It wasn't the hysterical, weeping grief of a mother, though that was present too, a dull ache beneath the surface. This was a different kind of pain, sharper, colder, coalescing into a diamond-hard resolve. My Sarah, my bright, hopeful girl, who deserved so much more than this casual, heartless abandonment. She was a fighter, even if she hadn't known it. And now I would fight for her. For the justice she deserved. For the respect he had denied her. I remembered. Bits and pieces, whispered over hurried phone calls from Sarah. How Mark handled all the finances. How he controlled everything. But also, a passing comment about a joint bank account, easily accessible through an app, shared between them. Sarah, always meticulous, had even once helped me set up my own online banking, showing me how seamless it all was. It's all connected, Mom, she laughed like magic. A flicker of an idea, dangerous and exhilarating, sparked in the depths of my despair. Mark believed he was untouchable. He believed I was just a provincial old woman, easily dismissed, easily intimidated. But he didn't know me. Not truly. He didn't know the silent strength that had seen me through widowhood, through raising a brilliant, headstrong daughter on my own. He didn't know the years I'd spent working in the school administration office, meticulously balancing budgets, navigating complex bureaucratic systems, understanding the intricate dance of numbers and regulations. I might not be a high-powered executive, but I knew how money moved. And more importantly, I knew how to stop it. My hand found the small, worn purse I'd brought from home. Inside, my cell phone. With trembling fingers, I scrolled through my contacts. Sarah's number. I hesitated, then remembered an old, rarely used tablet she'd left with me years ago, a spare she'd upgraded from. It was still in my carry-on bag, tucked away, forgotten until now. It might have the access I needed. I walked out of Sarah's room, my face a mask of determination, ignoring the sympathetic glances from the nurses. In the waiting area, I found a quiet corner and pulled out the tablet. It hummed to life. Sarah, bless her organized heart, had always used simple, memorable passwords. It took a few tries, but soon I was in. I navigated through her apps, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And there it was, Sterling Financial. A shared portal, a joint account. His money, her money, their money. My fingers flew across the screen, a bizarre mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through me. I found the options, the fine print, the terms and conditions I had once, long ago, helped Robert decipher for his small carpentry business. There were options for security freezes, for reporting suspicious activity, for initiating a review. All legitimate actions if one had cause. And I had cause. More than enough. He had abandoned his dying wife. That, to me, was the ultimate suspicious activity. With a cold, precise focus, I initiated the process. One account. Then another. And another. Every joint account, every investment portfolio linked to Sarah's name, every credit line, every asset I could possibly access through the digital trail she had inadvertently left open for me. It was tedious, complex work, requiring careful attention to detail, but I worked with a ruthless efficiency, fueled by the image of Mark's laughing face on the yacht, juxtaposed with Sarah's pale, still form. I remembered the old saying, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." But I was no scorn lover. I was a mother, scorned on behalf of her dying child. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 45 minutes, I was done. Every avenue I could find, every financial artery I could pinch, had been frozen, flagged, or otherwise rendered inaccessible to Mark Sterling. A strange calm settled over me. It was a dark, unsettling calm, but a calm nonetheless. I closed the tablet, tucked it away, and returned to Sarah's bedside. I leaned over her, stroking her hair. "Now we wait, my sweet girl," I whispered, my voice rough with emotion. "Now we begin." The taste of impending justice, cold and metallic, was already on my tongue. The quiet hum of the ICU, once a torment, now felt almost like a prelude to a storm. I sat by Sarah's bedside, holding her hand, my heart a strange mix of profound grief and grim satisfaction. I imagined the digital dominoes falling, the electronic pathways seizing up, the carefully constructed financial world of Mark Sterling grinding to a halt. It was a silent war, fought with clicks and keystrokes, but I knew its impact would be anything but silent. And then it began. My cell phone, which had been blessedly quiet since my arrival, suddenly burst to life. The screen screamed Mark Sterling. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times, letting the frantic energy on the other end build. A smirk, faint and almost imperceptible, touched my lips. He was discovering his predicament. Good. On the 4th ring, I answered. His voice, when it came, was not the smooth, confident baritone I remembered, nor the charming, playful tone he used with Sarah. It was raw, laced with disbelief and a barely contained fury. Eleanor, what the hell have you done? His voice was a roar, distorted by the phone line, but unmistakably furious. My accounts. They're all frozen. Every single one. What kind of sick game is this? I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the silence hang between us for a moment, savoring his panic. A game, Mark? My voice was calm, steady, a shocking contrast to his escalating rage. Is that what you call it? I call it basic security protocol for someone who abandons his dying wife to party on a yacht. A gasp, then a string of expletives that made me flinch, not from shock, but from the sheer vulgarity. Dying wife? What are you talking about? Sarah's fine. She's always overreacting. This is a mistake. My assistant told me she had a little flu, nothing serious. He was practically spitting the words, a flimsy dam of lies crumbling under the pressure of his financial crisis. A little flu, Mark? My voice remained level, though my heart was pounding. She's in intensive care, Mark. On a ventilator. Her heart is failing. Dr. Sharma has said there is no hope. I paused, letting that sink in. And she's been alone for days. While you were hosting your splashy success of a gala. The line went silent for a beat, a rare moment of speechlessness from him. Then, a new wave of anger, tinged with a desperate, almost pathetic whine. You crazy old hag. Do you have any idea what you've done? My entire portfolio, my active investments, my payroll for next week. Everything is locked down. I'm ruined. I'll sue you. I'll have you thrown in jail. You can't just. I can, I interrupted, my voice hardening. And I have. Now, here's what you're going to do, Mark. You are going to get off that yacht, or wherever you are, and you are going to come to this hospital. Now, you're going to be here, by your wife's side, until further notice. And you will ensure she receives the best care available. Do that, and maybe we can discuss the possibility of unfreezing some of your funds. Refuse, and you can explain your financial ruin to your investors, your lawyers, and the press. Because believe me, Mark, I will make sure the world knows why Mark Sterling, the great financier, suddenly has no access to a dime. There was another stunned silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the sudden realization of the gravity of the situation, not for Sarah, but for himself. His voice, when he finally spoke, was still furious, but laced with a new, grudging edge of capitulation. You can't be serious. This is blackmail. Call it what you will, I said, a steely resolve in my voice. But Sarah is dying, Mark. And you will be here. Or you will lose everything. You have 1 hour. If you're not here, I'll assume you've made your choice. And I'll make mine. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly, but my resolve unshaken. I felt a surge of cold power, an unfamiliar but potent sensation. He was coming. Not out of love, not out of concern for Sarah, but out of fear for his own financial well-being. It was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. Exactly 47 minutes later, the door to Sarah's room burst open. Mark Sterling stood there, not even bothering to knock. He looked disheveled, his expensive shirt rumpled, his hair out of place. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and terror. But not grief. Never grief. Eleanor, he snarled, his eyes blazing. He barely glanced at Sarah, his focus entirely on me. What kind of deranged witch are you? My entire world just stopped because of your insane vendetta. I rose from my chair, my spine stiff, my gaze unwavering. My vendetta, Mark, is for my daughter. And your world stopped because you valued champagne and yachts more than your dying wife. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. You have no right. No legal standing. I'll have my lawyers here in an hour, and they'll tear you apart. This is illegal. Perhaps, I conceded, a chilling calm in my voice. But by the time your lawyers untangle the mess, your companies will be in default, your clients will have abandoned you, and your reputation will be in tatters. Is that a risk you're willing to take, Mark? For the sake of a few more hours on your yacht. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting from me to the silent, inert form of Sarah, then back to me. He was trapped. He saw it. The arrogance, the charming facade, had cracked, revealing a desperate, grasping man beneath. Fine, he ground out, the word dripping with venom. What do you want? I'm here. Now unfreeze them. Not so fast, I said, a flicker of triumph in my eyes. Your presence here is merely the first step. You will stay. You will speak with Dr. Sharma. You will understand Sarah's condition. And you will arrange for a private nurse, the best money can buy, to be here around the clock. Your funds will remain frozen until I am satisfied that Sarah is receiving the care she deserves and that you are truly present. And even then, only partial access. The rest will remain locked, a constant reminder of your priorities. He glared at me, his jaw clenched, his eyes filled with a hatred so potent it felt like a physical force. But he was defeated for now. He knew it. The power had shifted. And I, Eleanor Vance, the quiet, unassuming widow from Bloomington, felt a cold, hard satisfaction bloom in my heart. This was just the beginning. Mark's presence in Sarah's room was a bitter, hollow victory. He sat in the visitor's chair, rigid and uncomfortable, his eyes glued to his phone screen more often than to his dying wife. He'd made a show of speaking to Dr. Sharma, asking a few perfunctory questions about Sarah's condition, but his gaze was vacant, his mind clearly elsewhere. He talked constantly about his urgent calls, his critical business meetings, his catastrophic losses since his accounts were frozen. Each word was a fresh wound, a testament to his utter lack of empathy. He complained about the hospital food, the uncomfortable chair, the lack of privacy. He spoke of Sarah as if she were a minor inconvenience, a wrench thrown into the perfectly oiled machinery of his glamorous life. He never once touched her hand, never whispered a word of comfort. His disdain only fueled my resolve. While he sulked and complained, I began my own quiet, relentless investigation. I was no detective, but I was a mother, and a mother's instincts, sharpened by grief and fury, are more potent than any training. I started with the nurses. They were kind, professional, but their subtle glances, the way they avoided direct eye contact when I asked about Mark, spoke volumes. Sarah has been quite ill for some time, Mrs. Vance, Nurse Miller said one afternoon, her voice lowered conspiratorially. She'd come in for checkups, sometimes alone, sometimes with Mr. Sterling. But his visits became less frequent. And her appointments, they often went missed. She seemed withdrawn. And frankly, quite thin. Dr. Sharma, seeing my persistence, was a bit more direct. Sarah's heart condition was manageable with proper medication and lifestyle changes. But it requires consistent monitoring. It appears there was a period where she wasn't adhering to her treatment plan. Or perhaps, wasn't able to. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Mark didn't ensure she was. My attention shifted to Sarah's personal effects. The hospital had a small bag of her belongings, a few toiletries, a worn paperback novel, and a purse. Inside the purse, a newer smartphone and a small, leather-bound journal. I hesitated before opening the journal. It felt like an intrusion, a violation of her privacy. But what was privacy when my daughter lay dying, potentially at the hands of neglect? The journal was filled with Sarah's elegant handwriting, growing more erratic as the entries progressed. At first, it chronicled her excitement about her new life in California, her dreams with Mark. He's everything I ever wanted, Mom. So successful, so attentive. He makes me feel like a queen. My heart ached at the naive optimism. But then, the tone shifted. Subtle at first, then more pronounced. Mark's been busy with a new venture. He says I should stay home, rest. The parties are too much for my heart anyway, he insists. I miss my friends, but he says they don't understand our world. He got so angry when I wanted to apply for that art class. Said it was a waste of time, that my art isn't practical. He laughed at my paintings. I haven't picked up a brush since. I feel so alone sometimes. Mark is always traveling or at the club. When he is here, he just wants me to be quiet. Pretty. He says my anxieties are making him stressed. He controls all the money now, says it's easier that way for investments. I have to ask him for everything. The entries grew darker. There were mentions of arguments, of being yelled at, of feeling small and insignificant. A chilling entry. He found my pills. My heart medication. He said I was taking too many, that I was faking it for attention. He threw them away. I'm scared, Mom. My chest hurts. And then, the chilling revelation. I found his ledgers. Hidden in his study. He's been taking money from my trust fund, Mom. The one Dad left me. He's been gambling it away on his risky schemes. And he's taken out loans in my name. Without telling me. I confronted him, but he just laughed, said I was confused. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I lost everything, including my sanity. He said no one would believe a fragile, emotional woman like me. I don't know what to do. My heart hurts so much. A cold fury, unlike anything I had ever known, washed over me. Not just neglect. Not just abandonment. But calculated, cruel abuse. Financial manipulation, emotional gaslighting, medical neglect. He had systematically dismantled my daughter's life, piece by agonizing piece. He hadn't just ignored her illness. He had actively contributed to it, suppressed her, silenced her. I picked up Sarah's newer smartphone. Mark had, of course, locked me out of that one. But the old tablet I'd used to freeze his accounts? It still held a treasure trove of her digital life. I found old emails, meticulously organized. Communication with her financial advisor before she met Mark, buoyant, confident. Then, a slow fade as Mark took over. But there were recent drafts, unsent emails to an attorney, filled with desperate pleas for help. They described her fear of Mark, her suspicions about his financial dealings, her isolation. They described her dwindling health, the increasing pain in her chest, the fear that he was deliberately keeping her from her medication. She had been too scared, too weak, too trapped to send them. And then, the final, most devastating discovery. Tucked away in a hidden folder on the tablet, a scanned copy of a legal document. It was a prenuptial agreement. A very comprehensive one, heavily weighted in Mark's favor. But attached to it, in a separate, much smaller file, was a signed codicil to Sarah's will. It was dated just a few months ago. It stated, in clear, concise legal language, that in the event of her death, if her passing was determined to be a result of negligence, abuse, or financial coercion by her spouse, Mark Sterling, then her entire estate, including her remaining trust fund and half of their shared assets, would bypass him entirely and be transferred to Eleanor Vance. My name. Sarah knew. She knew he was killing her, slowly, systematically. And she had found a way, a last desperate act, to fight back. My quiet, artistic daughter, whom I thought was so fragile, had left a breadcrumb trail, a silent scream for justice. She had protected herself and, in doing so, had armed me with the ultimate weapon. I looked at Mark, still engrossed in his phone, oblivious to the storm gathering around him. He thought he was so clever. He thought he had won. He was about to learn that my daughter, even in death, was far more resilient than he could ever imagine. And I, her mother, was just getting started. The revelations from Sarah's journal and the codicil to her will hit me with the force of a physical blow, yet they also ignited a cold, clear fire within me. The grief was still there, a constant ache, but it was now laced with a burning sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my daughter's passing, it was about her murder, slow and calculated, at the hands of a man who saw her only as a means to an end. Mark, meanwhile, continued his charade, feigning concern when a nurse was present, but reverting to petulance and self-pity the moment he thought no one was watching. He was still calling his own lawyers. I overheard him, demanding they fix this mess and get rid of this crazy old woman. He had no idea what he was truly up against. I knew I couldn't fight him alone in his world of slick lawyers and endless money. My small-town experience with school budgets and Robert's modest business dealings wouldn't suffice here. I needed someone who understood the intricate, often predatory, dance of wealth and law in a city like San Diego. I needed an advocate. Nurse Miller, sensing my quiet desperation and perhaps having witnessed enough of Mark's callousness, discreetly slipped me a business card one evening. He helped my sister through a difficult divorce. Mrs. Vance, she whispered, glancing nervously towards the door. He's tough, but he's fair. And he believes in fighting for what's right. The card read, David Cohen, attorney at law, specializing in family law and financial litigation. His office was not in some gleaming high-rise, but in a more modest, though still respectable, building downtown. The next morning, leaving Mark to fret over his frozen accounts, I called. David Cohen's assistant, a no-nonsense woman named Maria, managed to squeeze me in for an emergency consultation that very afternoon. The moment I stepped into David Cohen's office, I felt a faint stir of hope. It was understated, efficient, filled with stacks of legal tomes and the scent of old paper and ambition. David Cohen himself was a man in his late 40s, with a sharp intellect evident in his quick, assessing eyes and the faint lines etched around them. He had a receding hairline, a neatly trimmed beard, and a suit that, while expensive, looked well worn from long hours. He offered me a firm handshake and a small, sympathetic smile. Mrs. Vance, he began, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk, Maria told me your situation is urgent. Please, tell me everything. I took a deep breath, marshaling my thoughts, the raw emotion kept firmly in check. I laid out the story, calmly and methodically. Sarah's illness, Mark's absence, the discovery of him on the yacht, the frozen accounts, his furious reaction. Then, I pulled out Sarah's journal, the printouts of the unsent emails to the lawyer, and, finally, the scanned copy of the codicil to her will. David listened without interruption, his expression unreadable, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as I described the financial maneuvers I had executed. When I presented the codicil, he took it, his brow furrowing as he read. This is quite remarkable, Mrs. Vance, he said, finally breaking the silence, his voice low and thoughtful. The initial freezing of accounts was a bold move, highly aggressive and, frankly, on shaky legal ground if you didn't have standing. But given the circumstances and his reaction, it certainly got his attention. And then this. He tapped the codicil. This changes everything. Your daughter was clearly aware of what was happening. She was trying to protect herself. And you. She was terrified, I stated, the memory of her journal entries bringing a fresh wave of pain. He isolated her, manipulated her, bled her dry. And then he let her die. David leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. Mark Sterling is a powerful man, Mrs. Vance. He has deep pockets and even deeper connections. He's known for playing dirty. His lawyers will be formidable. They'll try to paint you as a grief-stricken, unstable old woman, acting out of malice, trying to steal his fortune. Let them try, I said, my voice unwavering. I have Sarah's words. I have the medical records showing his neglect. I have his own behavior. And I have the truth. He looked at me, a new glint of respect in his eyes. All right, Mrs. Vance. Let's talk strategy. Firstly, we need to formalize the freezing of his assets. We'll petition the court for a temporary restraining order on his accounts, citing elder abuse, or in this case, spousal abuse leading to medical neglect and financial fraud. The codicil gives us significant leverage. It establishes your standing and your daughter's clear intent. What about the accounts I froze directly? I asked. He gave a wry smile. Technically, an aggressive move. But the banks will have already reported the suspicious activity, and with a court order, we can make it legitimate. The key is to act fast before he manages to move any remaining accessible funds or his lawyers get a counterorder. We will also pursue charges for financial fraud and possibly elder abuse. The medical neglect aspect, while difficult to prove in a criminal court, can be compelling in civil litigation, especially if combined with the financial coercion. We spent the next 2 hours meticulously going through every detail. The timeline of Sarah's illness, my frantic calls, Mark's complete indifference. The evidence from the journal, the unsent emails. David asked probing questions, challenging my assumptions, looking for weaknesses in our case. He explained the complexities, the potential pitfalls, the long and arduous battle ahead. "This won't be easy, Mrs. Vance," he cautioned, his voice serious. "He will fight tooth and nail. He will try to discredit you. He will try to bury us in paperwork. Are you prepared for that?" I met his gaze, my eyes firm. "Mr. Cohen," I said, "I watched my daughter die alone while her husband partied. I am prepared for anything." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Good. Because Mark Sterling just picked a fight with the wrong mother. We'll start filing the motions first thing tomorrow. For now, go back to your daughter. And keep a close eye on Mr. Sterling. He's a cornered animal, and cornered animals can be dangerous." Leaving his office, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in days. I had found an ally. A formidable one. The battle ahead was daunting, but I was no longer alone. The quiet, unsuspecting widow had found her voice, and now she had found her sword. The storm was coming, and Mark Sterling was about to discover the true cost of abandoning Sarah. Back in Sarah's sterile room, the hum of the machine seemed to mock the vibrant memories now swirling in my mind. David Cohen's unwavering gaze and the weight of Sarah's journal in my bag had solidified my purpose, but the emotional toll was immense. As Mark paced the hallway outside, making frantic, hushed calls, I sat by Sarah's side, letting the memories wash over me, a bittersweet torrent of joy and sorrow. I remembered Sarah as a little girl, all bright eyes and boundless energy, chasing fireflies in the humid Illinois summer evenings. Her laughter, a bell-like chime, echoing through our small backyard. She loved to draw, to paint, her tiny hands smearing colors across paper, creating worlds only she could see. Robert and I had encouraged her, bought her endless art supplies, enrolled her in every local class. We believed in her dreams. I remembered her as a teenager, passionate and fiercely independent, yet with a tender heart. She'd bring home stray animals, defend the underdog in school debates, and lose herself for hours in classic novels. She had a keen intellect, a sharp wit, and a compassionate spirit. She dreamt of moving to a big city, of making her mark, of finding a love that mirrored the deep, quiet affection Robert and I shared. Then came Mark. He was so polished, so charming, so utterly convincing. He had promised her the world, a life of luxury and endless possibilities. I remembered Sarah's radiant smile the day she told us she was engaged, her eyes sparkling with a future I had so desperately wanted for her. But now, looking at her gaunt, lifeless face, connected to a symphony of machines, I saw the erosion. I saw how the vivacious spark had been systematically extinguished. He hadn't just neglected her, he had systematically, insidiously, stifled her very essence. He had laughed at her art, dismissed her friends, controlled her finances, and ultimately, taken away her ability to even seek medical help. The vibrant girl who loved to paint had become a prisoner in her own gilded cage, slowly fading away. A tear traced a path down my cheek, but it was not just a tear of grief. It was a tear of fierce, protective love, mixed with an unyielding resolve. I would not let his cruelty be her legacy. My old friend, Brenda, from Bloomington, called that evening. Her voice, so familiar, so steeped in the rhythms of home, was a welcome balm. "Eleanor, honey, how is she? Is Sarah doing any better? And that Mark, has he shown up yet?" I chose my words carefully, revealing only enough to convey the gravity of the situation without burdening Brenda with the full, dark truth of Mark's depravity. "She's very critical, Brenda. And yes, Mark is here, but not in the way one might hope." I skirted the details of the frozen accounts and the legal battle that was just beginning. Brenda, a kind-hearted soul, could only offer platitudes and prayers. "Oh, Eleanor, you must be so strong. Just keep praying, honey. God works in mysterious ways." Her well-meaning words, while comforting in their intent, also highlighted the chasm between my old life and the terrifying reality I now inhabited. No one back home could truly grasp the depths of the betrayal, the intricate web of lies and manipulation. I was on my own in this battle, a lone warrior in a foreign land. But paradoxically, this isolation strengthened me. It stripped away any pretense, any need to explain or justify. My mission was clear, and it was mine alone. As the days bled into one another, Sarah's condition became a cruel barometer of my own fluctuating hopes and despairs. One morning, the nurse mentioned a slight improvement in her breathing, a barely perceptible flicker of activity on one of the monitors. For a fleeting moment, a foolish, desperate hope surged through me. Could she rally? Could she fight her way back? I squeezed her hand, whispering words of encouragement, willing her to return to me. The thought of her survival, of seeing Mark face justice while she recovered, was a powerful motivator. But then, the next day, a new infection would set in, or her heart rate would become dangerously erratic. Dr. Sharma would deliver grim updates, her voice heavy with regret. "Her body is simply too weak, Mrs. Vance. We are managing symptoms, but she isn't responding to treatment." Each setback was a hammer blow, pushing me deeper into the abyss of grief, but also hardening my resolve against Mark. If she wouldn't survive, then her justice must. Mark, meanwhile, had settled into a sullen, resentful routine. He'd spend an hour or two in Sarah's room, mostly on his phone, making loud, complaining calls about the inconvenience. His lawyers had already sent me a threatening letter, warning of legal action for defamation and financial interference. David Cohen had simply smiled when I showed it to him. "Bluster, Mrs. Vance. They're scared. We have the truth on our side." But Mark's behavior grew more erratic. I saw him arguing with the nurses, demanding special treatment, complaining about the food. He glared at me whenever I entered, his eyes burning with a venomous mix of hatred and fear. He was like a cornered snake, lashing out blindly. His threats, once dismissible, now carried an undercurrent of genuine malice. He wasn't just losing money, he was losing control. And a man like Mark Sterling, stripped of his control, was a dangerous beast indeed. I knew the quiet battle was over. The chess pieces had been set, the opening moves made. The next phase would be louder, more public, and far more brutal. But I was ready. For Sarah, I was ready. The air in the hospital, already thick with the scent of antiseptic and unspoken anxieties, now felt charged with a palpable tension, largely emanating from Mark. His initial bluster had given way to a desperate, snarling fury as the legal and financial walls closed in around him. David Cohen had moved swiftly. The court order, formalizing the freeze on Mark's assets and initiating an investigation into his financial dealings with Sarah's trust, had been served. It was a crushing blow to Mark, a public declaration of his entanglement in something far more sinister than a simple business dispute. One afternoon, as I was returning to Sarah's room after a brief, much-needed break for coffee, Mark intercepted me in the hallway. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, his eyes blazing with a dangerous light. The thin veneer of charm he usually wore had completely evaporated, revealing the ugly core beneath. "This has gone far enough, Eleanor," he hissed, his voice low and menacing, but trembling with barely suppressed rage. "My lawyers say you're treading on very thin ice. You think you're clever, don't you? A little old lady playing detective. But you're out of your league." I met his gaze directly, refusing to flinch. "I'm fighting for my daughter, Mark. Something you never bothered to do." "Your daughter is a lost cause," he snarled, his words cutting deep. "She always was. Weak. Emotional. You raised her to be that way. And now you're trying to ruin my life because of her poor choices." He pulled a thick, official-looking envelope from his jacket pocket and shoved it into my hand. "Here. A final offer. My lawyers drew it up. Sign this, unfreeze my accounts, drop all these ridiculous charges, and I'll give you $500,000. Tax-free. A clean break. You can go back to your little farm town and pretend none of this ever happened. Otherwise, his eyes narrowed, and a cruel smile twisted his lips. Otherwise, I'll unleash a media storm that will tear you to shreds. I'll paint you as a senile, gold-digging opportunist. A vindictive old hag trying to steal from her dying daughter's husband. And believe me, Eleanor, with my connections, I can make sure everyone believes it. Your reputation, your entire life, will be ruined. I looked down at the envelope, then back at his sneering face. $500,000. More money than I had ever seen in my life. It could buy me comfort, security, a life free of financial worry. For a fleeting second, the thought flickered. Is this enough? Can I just walk away? But then I thought of Sarah. Sarah, frail and fading, who had trusted me to fight for her. Sarah, whose final, desperate act was to point me towards justice. My daughter's life is not for sale, Mark, I said, my voice quiet, but steel hard. I tore the envelope in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the polished hospital floor. And neither is my integrity. You want to fight? Then fight. But know this. I am not afraid of your media circus. I am not afraid of your lawyers. And I am certainly not afraid of you. My daughter died because of your greed and your callousness. And I will see you pay for it. Every last penny, every last shred of your reputation. His face went crimson, a vein throbbing in his temple. You'll regret this, old woman. You have no idea who you're messing with. He turned abruptly, stalking away down the corridor, leaving me standing amidst the scattered pieces of his generous offer. His threats, I soon discovered, were not idle. That evening, as I returned to the dingy motel room I was now calling home, I found the door slightly ajar. A cold knot formed in my stomach. The room was a mess. Drawers pulled open, my meager belongings tossed haphazardly. My few legal papers, my copies of Sarah's journal entries, were scattered on the floor. Nothing was missing, but the message was clear. I was being watched. I was being intimidated. The anonymous calls began shortly after. Hat-ups. Heavy breathing. Once, a distorted voice whispering, "Go home, old lady. Before you get hurt." My old friend Brenda called again, distressed. "Eleanor, honey, I just saw a local news report here about you. Saying you're making false accusations against that poor Mr. Sterling, trying to extort money from him. He was playing dirty, just as David Cohen had warned. But instead of instilling fear, these tactics only hardened my resolve. He thought he could break me, just as he had broken Sarah. He thought I was just a fragile, easily dismissed elderly woman. He vastly underestimated the quiet strength forged in the crucible of a mother's love and a daughter's betrayal. I called David Cohen, recounting the break-in and the threatening calls. He listened gravely. "This is escalation, Mrs. Vance. It means we're hitting him where it hurts. It also means you need to be careful. We'll inform the police about the intimidation, but don't expect too much. Mark Sterling has friends in high places." "I understand," I replied, my voice steady. "But I will not back down. Not now. Not ever." A profound weariness settled over me, a bone-deep exhaustion that permeated every fiber of my being. But beneath it, a new kind of strength, cold and unyielding. I was in a war, a brutal, ugly war for my daughter's memory, for her justice. Mark Sterling might have money, power, and connections, but he didn't have the truth. And he didn't have a mother's fury. The stakes were higher than ever, the dangers more real. But there was no turning back. My fight had just truly begun. The days that followed Mark's threats were a blur of heightened tension and deepening despair. Sarah's condition continued its agonizing decline. Her breaths became shallower, the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator more labored. The nurses moved with a solemn quietness around her bed, their faces etched with a familiar sorrow. Mark was still present, a grim, brooding shadow, making sporadic calls to his lawyers, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and panic. His occasional attempts to demand information from the doctors were met with polite but firm rebuffs. He was a caged beast, and the cage was tightening. One crisp Californian morning, Dr. Sharma approached me, her eyes heavy with compassion. She pulled up a chair beside me, her voice gentle, almost a whisper. "Mrs. Vance, we need to talk." "Sarah, she's not responding to anything. Her heart is simply too weak. Her body is shutting down." My breath hitched. I had known this was coming, had seen it in the gradual fading of Sarah's essence, but hearing the definitive words was a fresh, brutal stab to the heart. "What are you saying, doctor?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "We've exhausted all medical options. Further aggressive measures would only prolong her suffering, without any hope of recovery. We believe it's time to consider palliative care, to make her comfortable, and to discuss withdrawing life support." Her gaze was kind, but unwavering. "It's the most difficult decision a parent can make, Mrs. Vance. We understand that. But it's also the most merciful." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Withdraw life support. To actively choose to let go of the last fragile thread connecting my daughter to this world. The thought was unbearable, a tearing agony that threatened to consume me whole. My Sarah. My beautiful, vibrant Sarah. How could I make such a choice? I looked at her, lying so still, so vulnerable, her chest rising and falling with the artificial rhythm of the machine. Her face, even in its pallor, held a ghost of the beauty I remembered. I reached out, tracing the outline of her cheek with a trembling finger. She deserved peace. She deserved to be free from this endless, agonizing fight. "Could I have some time with her?" I asked, my voice raw with unshed tears. "Alone?" Dr. Sharma nodded, her eyes glistening. "Of course, Mrs. Vance. Take all the time you need. We'll be just outside." She gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze and then left, signaling to the nurses to do the same. The room fell into a profound silence, broken only by the relentless beeping and whooshing. I was utterly alone with my daughter in these final, sacred moments. I pulled my chair closer, taking her hand in mine, feeling the coldness of her skin, the faint, flickering pulse. "Oh, Sarah," I whispered, tears streaming freely down my face. "My sweet, brave girl. What has he done to you?" I recounted memories, soft and loving. Her first steps. Her first masterpiece crayon drawing. Her graduation. The day she told me she loved Mark. Each memory was a painful echo in the quiet room. As I spoke, pouring my heart out, something incredible, impossibly fragile, happened. Her eyelids, which had been stubbornly closed for so long, fluttered. Slowly, agonizingly, they opened. Her eyes, clouded with pain and exhaustion, focused on me. On my face. A gasp caught in my throat. "Sarah? My darling? Can you hear me?" A faint, almost imperceptible squeeze of my hand. Her lips, dry and cracked, moved. A tiny, raspy sound escaped them, barely a whisper. I leaned in, my ear close to her mouth, straining to hear over the hiss of the ventilator. "Mom." The sound was a ghost of her voice, thin and reedy, but unmistakably hers. "Yes, darling, I'm here. I'm right here." My heart pounded with a desperate, impossible hope. Her eyes, full of a pain that tore at my soul, fixed on mine. Another effort, another whisper, barely audible. "F found, the box." "The box? What box?" My mind raced, trying to decipher her cryptic words. Was it another secret? Another piece of the puzzle? But her strength was fading. Her eyes began to drift, the spark dimming. "What box, Sarah? Tell me." I urged, my voice desperate. But it was too late. Her eyelids fluttered again, then closed. The faint squeeze of her hand loosened. The monitor beside her bed let out a long, flat tone, the sound of a fading heartbeat. A single, silent tear escaped her eye, tracing a path into her hair. My world shattered. "Sarah, no, don't leave me," I cried, clutching her hand, pressing my face against hers, feeling the last warmth seep from her skin. But she was gone. My daughter was gone. The door burst open. Dr. Sharma and the nurses rushed in, their faces grim. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking monitors, feeling for a pulse. But their movements were imbued with a sense of inevitability. After a few agonizing moments, Dr. Sharma straightened up, her face etched with profound sadness. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice gentle. "She's gone." My knees buckled. A primal scream tore from my throat, a sound of absolute desolation. My beautiful girl. Gone. Just like that. The battle was over for her. But for me? A new, even fiercer resolve hardened within me. The box. What could it mean? A final, desperate clue from my dying daughter. Even in her last moments, she was fighting, trying to give me something, anything, to ensure justice. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to drown me. But beneath it, a cold, unyielding flame flickered, fueled by Sarah's last, whispered word. Mark Sterling had not just stolen her life, he had stolen her final piece. And I, her mother, would ensure he paid for every single drop of her suffering. There would be no mercy. There would only be justice. The world, already a muted canvas of grief, shattered completely the moment Dr. Sharma confirmed Sarah was gone. My scream echoed in the sterile room, a raw, animal sound torn from the deepest part of my soul. I clung to Sarah's cold hand, denying the undeniable, begging her to come back, to tell me more about this box she had whispered of. The nurses, their faces a blur of professional sympathy, gently guided me away, their touch a cruel reminder of my utter powerlessness. Mark, alerted by the commotion, stood in the doorway, his face a grotesque mask of feigned concern, quickly replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible flicker of relief. The monster had won his freedom. Or so he thought. The grief was a crushing weight, threatening to collapse me entirely. But beneath the suffocating blanket of sorrow, the cold flame of resolve ignited by Sarah's last whisper burned even brighter. F found, the box, her final message. A desperate plea. My daughter, even in death, was guiding my hand, urging me to continue the fight. Mark's voice, when he finally approached me outside the room, was surprisingly calm, almost conciliatory. "Eleanor, I know this is hard. Devastating. But now, with Sarah gone, surely you'll see reason. We can move past this. Unfreeze the accounts. We can sort out Sarah's estate amicably." He even dared to place a hand on my arm. I recoiled as if burned. My eyes, still swimming with tears, narrowed into slits of pure ice. "Don't you dare, Mark," I hissed, my voice low and venomous. "Don't you dare speak her name. And don't you dare think this changes anything. It only changes the stakes." He pulled back, his composure finally cracking. "You old fool. You really think you can go up against me? With nothing? She's gone, Eleanor. Your leverage is gone." "My leverage, Mark," I said, a chilling calm settling over me, "is my daughter's dying wish. And the truth, which I assure you, is far more powerful than your lies and your money." I called David Cohen immediately. He listened, his voice heavy with condolences for Sarah, but quickly shifting to business. "The codicil is now fully in effect, Mrs. Vance. We move forward. We meet Sterling's lawyers in court first thing tomorrow for the injunction hearing. This changes the dynamic entirely. Now it's not just about freezing assets, it's about a full claim to her estate and an investigation into her death." The next morning, the sterile glow of the courtroom felt even colder than the hospital. Mark, flanked by a team of expensive, impeccably dressed lawyers, looked confident, almost smug. He shot me a disdainful glance, clearly believing that Sarah's death had removed my strongest weapon. He still saw me as a grieving, easily dismissed old woman. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. David Cohen, though, was a picture of quiet intensity. He laid out our case, methodically and powerfully. The medical records detailing Sarah's untreated condition, her dwindling health. The evidence of Mark's financial abuse from Sarah's journal and the unsent emails. And then, he presented the codicil to Sarah's will, a legal document signed and witnessed, explicitly disinheriting Mark if his actions contributed to her demise. Mark's lead lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Thorne, rose to object, attempting to dismiss the journal as the ramblings of a disturbed mind and the codicil as the manipulation of a grieving, unstable mother. She tried to paint me as a mercenary, trying to seize Mark's fortune. It was my turn to speak. David had advised me to stick to the facts, But I knew this moment needed more than dry legalities. I looked directly at Mark, then at the judge. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and steady, despite the tremor in my hands. "My daughter, Sarah Sterling, was a kind, brilliant woman. She deserved love, care, and respect. Instead, she received neglect, abuse, and abandonment from the man who swore to cherish her." I recounted Mark's celebration on the yacht, his indifference to Sarah's critical condition, his threats against me. "He did not just neglect her, Your Honor. He actively suppressed her, financially isolated her, and discouraged her from seeking the medical care she desperately needed." Then I paused, looking at Mark. His face, which had been impassive, now showed a flicker of unease. And in her final moments, when she miraculously opened her eyes, she whispered a clue. "A final message," she said. "F found. The box." A buzz went through the courtroom. Mark's lawyers leaned in, whispering frantically. Mark himself looked genuinely bewildered, then suddenly, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "What box, Mrs. Vance?" the judge asked, leaning forward, intrigued. "I didn't know, Your Honor. Not then. But after her passing, still haunted by her words, I returned to her home. The home Mark kept locked away from her friends, from her family. I searched. I took a deep breath. And I found it. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her studio, where she once loved to paint, the passion Mark had brutally extinguished." David Cohen stepped forward, a small, unassuming wooden box in his hands. It was old, intricately carved, clearly a cherished item. He opened it carefully. Inside, nestled on a velvet lining, were several items. "Your Honor," David announced, his voice ringing through the silent courtroom, "this box contains Sarah Sterling's personal diary, far more extensive than the journal her mother found, detailing years of Mark Sterling's psychological and financial abuse. It contains documented evidence of his hidden bank accounts, offshore holdings, and shell corporations used to siphon off her trust fund. It contains copies of forged documents, including loans taken out in Sarah's name, without her knowledge. And most damningly," he paused, his gaze sweeping over Mark, who was now utterly pale, his eyes wide with terror, "it contains a hidden voice recorder. A small, discreet device. And on it, a recording from just days before she was hospitalized. A recording of Mark Sterling explicitly telling Sarah he was withholding her medication because he believed she was faking her illness and that he would teach her a lesson about defying him." The courtroom erupted. Whispers, gasps, the frantic murmuring of Mark's lawyers. Mark himself rose from his seat, his face ashen, his mouth agape. "That's a lie. It's all fabricated. She's mad," he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. But the judge's gavel slammed down, silencing the chaos. "Order! Order in the court!" David Cohen played a snippet of the recording. Sarah's frail, tearful voice, pleading for her medication. And then, Mark's cold, unfeeling voice, cutting through her pleas like a knife. "You'll get it when you learn to appreciate what you have, Sarah. And stop pretending to be so sick. You're fine. It's all in your head." The sound reverberated through the courtroom, a chilling testament to his cruelty. Mark Sterling collapsed back into his chair, his face a mask of utter defeat and terror. His lawyers, looking utterly horrified, began to distance themselves, their whispers now directed at him with barely concealed disgust. The judge, his face grim, addressed Mark directly. "Mr. Sterling, based on the compelling evidence presented, the court is not only upholding the freeze on your assets, but is immediately issuing an arrest warrant. You are charged with aggravated financial fraud, severe spousal abuse, and criminal negligence leading to death. Your bail is denied. Sheriff, take him into custody." Two uniformed officers stepped forward, approaching Mark. He scrambled to his feet, protesting, his voice hoarse, but his words were lost in the sudden, decisive movements. He struggled, but it was futile. His facade, his carefully constructed empire, his very freedom, crumbled around him. As he was led away, handcuffed, he shot me one last look, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, mixed with a chilling terror. But it was a look that no longer held any power over me. I watched him go, feeling no joy, no elation. Only a profound, aching emptiness mixed with a grim satisfaction. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about Sarah. My quiet, artistic, brave Sarah, who had fought back even as life drained from her. Her last whisper, her hidden box, had brought her justice. And now, finally, she could rest. The days after Mark Sterling's arrest were a strange, disorienting blur. The courtroom drama, his terrified face as the handcuffs clicked shut, the stunned silence of the spectators, it all felt like a surreal dream, a movie playing out around me. But the cold, hard ache in my heart was undeniably real. Sarah was gone. Her justice had been served, but the void she left behind was vast and inconsolable. The funeral was a small affair, held in a quiet, sun-drenched cemetery overlooking the Pacific. Only David Cohen, Maria, a few of Sarah's old college friends whom David had managed to track down, and I were present. There were no grand eulogies from a grieving husband, no flowers sent from a remorseful family-in-law. Mark, of course, was in a holding cell, awaiting his arraignment. His parents, wealthy and influential in their own right, had disowned him, their carefully cultivated image shattered by the public scandal. They chose to believe his fabricated stories of my madness and extortion, rather than face the truth of their son's depravity. As I stood by Sarah's simple casket, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of a nearby cypress, I felt a profound sense of solitude. The quiet beauty of the setting was a stark contrast to the ugliness of the truth that had brought us here. I spoke a few words, my voice trembling but clear, remembering her laughter, her artistic spirit, her enduring kindness. I told her I loved her and that I had done what I could. A single tear escaped my eye, a last testament to a love that transcended life and death. The legal aftermath was protracted and exhausting. Mark's remaining lawyers, now desperate to mitigate the damage, tried every trick in the book. They attempted to discredit the voice recording, to paint Sarah's diary entries as fabrications, to argue that I had manipulated a frail, dying woman. But the evidence from the box was too compelling, too meticulously gathered by Sarah herself. The financial records exposed a labyrinthine scheme of fraud and theft. The medical records, combined with the recordings, painted a damning picture of deliberate neglect. Ultimately, facing an insurmountable mountain of evidence and the certainty of a lengthy prison sentence, Mark Sterling made a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to aggravated financial fraud and criminal negligence. The spousal abuse charges were dropped in exchange for his cooperation in revealing the full extent of his offshore assets and hidden accounts. He was sentenced to a substantial prison term, his fortune largely confiscated to cover restitution and penalties. His reputation, once so meticulously crafted, was utterly destroyed. He was stripped of everything he valued, his money, his status, his freedom. He faded from the headlines as quickly as he had once dominated them, a cautionary tale of greed and hubris. I followed the news reports with a detached interest, a sense of grim satisfaction, but no real joy. It was not joy that Sarah had died. It was not joy that a man's life had been ruined, even if he deserved it. It was simply the quiet, stark relief of justice served. Through David Cohen's efforts, the codicil to Sarah's will was upheld. Her remaining trust fund, surprisingly substantial once Mark's embezzlements were uncovered, and half of their shared assets, which had not been illegally siphoned off, were legally transferred to me. I found myself, unexpectedly, a wealthy woman. More money than I could ever have imagined. It felt like blood money, tainted by Mark's cruelty and Sarah's suffering. My first act was to establish the Sarah Vance Arts and Healing Foundation. Its mission: to provide support for aspiring artists who are victims of domestic abuse or financial exploitation, offering them a safe haven, resources, and the means to reclaim their voices and their creativity. A small portion of the funds went to Riverside Hospital, specifically for their cardiac unit, in Sarah's memory. The rest, I put into a conservative trust, ensuring it would do good in the world, in Sarah's name, for generations to come. It was the only way I could reconcile myself with the sudden, unwelcome wealth. It was her legacy, not his. I returned to Bloomington weeks later, stepping off the plane into the familiar embrace of Illinois air, a world away from the sun-drenched, treacherous coast of California. My small house, with its vibrant hydrangeas, looked exactly as I had left it. The scent of my garden, the comforting quiet of my neighborhood, it was all unchanged. But I was not. The Eleanor Vance who had left, a grieving, unassuming widow, was gone. In her place stood a woman tempered by fire, carved by sorrow, and forever marked by the fierce power of a mother's vengeance. The peaceful rhythm of my old life now felt different. My morning coffee, once a simple ritual, was now a moment of quiet reflection, a silent communion with Sarah's memory. My garden, once a source of gentle pleasure, was now a place where I felt Sarah's presence most keenly, a reminder of the beauty that could still bloom even after the deepest winter. My books, once a retreat from the world, were now a source of new knowledge, new ideas, as I learned about philanthropy, about advocacy, about justice. Brenda came over, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and unspoken questions. "Eleanor, you look different. Stronger." She was right. The weariness was still there, a deep-seated fatigue that settled in my bones, but it was overshadowed by a newfound sense of purpose, a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. I told her more of the truth, carefully, gently. Not all the gory details of Mark's depravity, but enough for her to understand the depth of Sarah's suffering and my motivation. She listened, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock and sympathy. "Oh, Eleanor," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "My dear, dear friend. What you've been through." The $500,000 Mark had offered me, the blood money, was a stark reminder of his attempts to buy my silence. But I had refused. And in that refusal, I had reclaimed not only Sarah's dignity but my own. I was no longer just the quiet widow. I was a protector, a fighter, a woman who had dared to challenge a powerful, cruel man and emerged victorious. The victory, though, was bittersweet. It did not bring Sarah back. No amount of money, no amount of justice, could fill the gaping hole she left in my life. But it brought a different kind of peace. The peace of knowing that she had not suffered in vain. The peace of knowing her voice, silenced in life, had echoed loudly in death, bringing down her tormentor. My purpose now extended beyond my garden, beyond my books. I became actively involved with the Sarah Vance Arts and Healing Foundation, traveling occasionally, meeting the young women whose lives we were touching, seeing the flicker of hope in their eyes. I shared Sarah's story, not for pity, but for inspiration, to show that even in the darkest of times, hope could be found and justice, however hard won, could prevail. I looked at the world with new eyes. I saw the hidden struggles, the quiet suffering, the injustices that often went unnoticed. And I knew that I, Eleanor Vance, could no longer be a passive observer. The fire that Mark Sterling had ignited within me, the ancient, fierce protectiveness of a mother, now burned as a steady, guiding light. Sarah was gone, but her spirit, her dreams, and her unwavering belief in justice lived on through me. My life was irrevocably changed, twisted by tragedy, yet ultimately forged into something stronger, more purposeful. I had lost my daughter, but I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. I had walked through the fire, and I had emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably, powerfully new. I looked out at the setting sun, painting the Illinois sky in hues of orange and purple, a reminder that even after the darkest night, a new day always dawns.